At this point, the Democratic Party has about as many presidential candidates as it has members. But strangely, there's not a lot of diversity of viewpoint in that party. On a couple of topics, big topics, everyone agrees. The first is immigration. And the view from the Democratic Party is no big deal. It's a fake problem. And if you think otherwise, you're insane.
It is absolute fiction that there's a national emergency here.
Showing that this is not about a crisis, it's a political ploy. Crisis, and it's a crisis that doesn't exist.
This national emergency is completely made up.
A wall is a colossal waste of money for a crisis that doesn't exist.
Even if he declares a national emergency, he's lying. Even if he declares it, it will be a declaration of a falsehood.
This whole idea of declaring a national emergency is ludicrous because there isn't one.
These people just get their talking points and read them. Obedient little foot soldiers that they are. And what they're telling you is the border is fine, and I don't care what's happening in your neighborhood. It's fine. You know what the real threat is? It's something you can't see, but it's deadlier than Godzilla and Vladimir Putin combined. It's global warming, and it's going to kill us all.
The biggest threat to our prosperity in this 21st century is climate change.
A crisis that could, at its worst, lead to extinction.
That climate change is real, is an existential threat to our country and the entire planet.
We are running out of runway to be able to fix this problem. We need all hands on deck.
When the planet has been in peril in the past, who came forward to save Earth from the scourge of Nazi and totalitarian regimes? We came forward.
So if you don't take global climate change seriously, you don't care about the world and the country. You don't care about people.
Now, here's just a note. Just because you string a series of unrelated cliches together doesn't make it a sentence, much less an idea. But they tell you this every single day. The border's totally fine. You're a racist if you disagree. The real problem is global warming. So the question is, does anyone believe this? Or do people just write it off as the transparent propaganda that it is? Well, we have a new poll that answers those questions. The poll asked voters what issue was most important to them. The number one issue, immigration. What percent picked global warming, that imminent threat? 2%. So voters know which issue is radically changing their country and which is a totally abstract distraction and excuse for another power grab. Joe Bastardi is a meteorologist. He's the author of the Climate Chronicles, Inconvenient Revelations You Won't Hear from Al Gore and Others, and he joins us tonight. Joe, thanks a lot for coming on. Is it surprising to you that after 25 years of really relentless propaganda, beginning in children's cartoons, going all the way up, probably till the moment of death, that Americans rate climate change at 2% concern? 2% are most concerned about climate change. Are you shocked?
Well, not really that shocked, because I think my experience is a much greater percentage of people in their 20s that believe what's going on. I think it's because they don't look at everything. I've said hundreds of times that if all I looked at and all I was told was the global warming issue, I'd say, well, I believe it too. CO2 is causing this. But when you start looking at the entire picture, the totality of the picture, and you put some perspective into it, that the last 40 years are the equivalent of 6 seconds out of an 80-year-old man's life, you realize that there is a very, very different story here. It's like one scene in a movie for 5 seconds determining the whole movie. That's not the case here at all. The foundation you stand on today was built yesterday to reach for tomorrow. It's the same thing with weather and climate, folks. What happens is you have to go back and look at the big picture. In our business, and what I do at Weather Bell is we need to supply accurate forecasts for energy companies. That includes wind and solar, retail companies, and knowing what happened yesterday and putting it in perspective and saying, guys, this can happen again, is something that we do.
So I just want to be clear. I'm not denying, and I'm not a meteorologist, unlike you, or a climate expert, that climate changes. It does change, of course,
absolutely,
and it has from the beginning since the planet cooled. But can I ask a question? Why, since more people were killed last year in the United States by illegal aliens than were killed by climate change, why do you think they are so focused on scaring us and telling us we're all going to die. Why do they need to tell us that when they don't know that?
I think H.L. Mencken, and I quoted this in my book, said it best, that practical politics always tries to whip up this kind of thing. Most of them are imaginary, and the urge to save humanity is almost always a false front for the urge to rule it. Now, that is a Democrat that said that back. He passed away in 1956, but since I come from that kind of background, from an old Democrat background, I knew who H.L. Mencken was. So I think that's what's involved here. I wrote that book because the purity of what I've loved since I was 3. My dad's a meteorologist, right? This is all I ever wanted to do. I can't believe that this is what it's come to. It's turned into this political football or whatever. It's really bad.
It is, and it's clearly political, not science speaking. Joe, thanks very much for that. I hope you'll come back.
If you invite me back, I'll be here. Thank you.
Done.